I think so. Really early on, if you're building 1, 2, 3 parts, that often looks different than building 1,000 parts. I think from the very first part, you want to have a plan for how you're going to build 1,000. If it's a process that is unrealistic and unsolvable at that 1,000 scale, I think it's worth really reconsidering what you're doing at that early stage.
Hello and welcome to the Being an Engineer podcast. Today we've got Michael Brooks, the founder and CEO of BayCath Medical, a catheter development and contract manufacturing company built to help medical device teams move faster through R&D and early production. His experience spans catheter development, process validation, manufacturing transfer, project leadership, and the challenges of turning promising medical technologies into viable products. Michael, welcome to the Being an Engineer podcast.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So tell us, why did you decide to become an engineer?
Yeah, back in high school, I was working as a beach lifeguard, really enjoyed the medical procedures, helping patients, more of the, future doctor activities. But really my school mindset was more engineering and physics, and really I enjoyed, math and science and physics, and try to find some way to bring those two together, and found biomedical engineering, realized you could make medical devices and help, thousands of people with the device instead of one patient at a time. And I that really spoke to me.
You remember how you discovered medical device engineering, biomedical engineering?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have an engineering pathways course at my high school. So I took 2 years of engineering actually during high school, and that really opened the door to all of different, branches and disciplines within engineering.
Yeah, that's awesome. In my high school, we did not have any engineering. There was a drafting class. I took a drafting class, and of course there was, physics and math and all that stuff. But we had no engineering, and I remember really not knowing what engineering was one day when my dad suggested you should look into engineering as a career. I was like, okay, sounds good. But I didn't know what it was. So that's great that you had a couple of years of introduction in high school even.
Yep. Yeah, it definitely helped. And all of my friends from those classes really have benefited from them. It was a really great program.
Yeah. Okay, so you've been in the medical device industry for a while now, primarily working on catheters, and you've worked for established contract manufacturing companies as well as, early stage startups. What have you learned about how innovation actually works?
Yeah, I think having both perspective, both the OEM and the CDMO side, is really interesting. It gives you a really good perspective into how both sides works. I think it's extremely important for, each side to understand how the other one is doing things. And at the end of the day, honestly, if you have good communication and good collaboration from both sides, projects just go so much smoother. As soon as that falls apart from either side, it really does impact the project, impact the timelines, impact the budget in really negative ways. And it's hard to watch when that happens, but it is just a reality of that scenario.
Yeah. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and if you can't think of anything, that's totally fine, but do any stories or specific situations come to mind where those two sides weren't really talking and it led to a less than ideal outcome?
Yeah, I see it quite a bit where one of our customers from the contract manufacturing side, one of our customers will make internal changes, have internal discussions around a potential build change, for example. Maybe they want to change the ID of a catheter we see that a fair amount. And that's fine. We're more than happy to make a change. But at the same time, we're having a conversation with the customer about let's order high volume materials, higher volume materials, maybe hundreds instead of tens. So we're ordering materials in order to make hundreds of these. Meanwhile, the customer internally is deciding between a huge change that essentially makes those materials invalid and useless. And I'm happy to wait. I'm happy to change based on what the customer needs long term. But if I don't know about that potential change, I can't plan for it. maybe it's different change. It doesn't necessarily impact the catheter in the same way, and it doesn't matter. I'll tell you that. But it's really hard to plan for things you don't know about.
Yeah, right. Let's back up just for a minute here. And for those audience members who aren't in the medical device field, can you explain what is a catheter? How is it used?
Yeah, great question. Really good point, actually. Most people think urinary catheters when they think catheters. It's really not the space we're in. We do more, cardiac, structural heart, neuro, other areas of the body. And really all a catheter is, if you look at like a garden hose, we try to make a garden hose that's slightly smaller, hopefully quite a bit smaller. And what we're really doing with that garden hose is going from generally, point A to point B, point A being outside the body, point B being inside the body. Generally, that's your femoral artery, kind of inside of your upper thigh, into whether that's the heart, the brain, an artery or a vein somewhere in your body to deliver some sort of a treatment. Often that is a stent, or you're removing a clot, or, in this case of structural heart, you're putting in essentially an implant into the heart to replace the valve. It truly is a delivery system. It's very specific to the device, very specific to the application. A lot of people don't realize that, even within medical devices. It's a lot of fine tuning involved in getting it right. But at the end of the day, it's in the body generally less than 6 hours. It's not an implant. It's relatively easy from an FDA standpoint, but still really fun to work on.
Yeah. Why do you think catheters have gotten so popular over the years?
There's a lot of procedures that we do right now, or physicians, surgeons do right now, that are, state of the art, the best medicine available. Something like, open heart surgery. Absolutely, if you need open heart surgery and that's the only way you're going to survive past the next 6 months, you're going to have open heart surgery. But when someone introduces a catheter-based approach for replacing your valve, which does the same thing potentially as that open heart surgery, just the impacts and the risk to the patient are severely diminished. It's not the most important factor. Cost is also severely diminished. And then recovery time as well. So when you have a surgery, generally the biggest risk to the patient is infection. Crazy enough, that's still the same thing for a catheter-based surgery, except that your infection risk goes from, your entire open chest cavity and all of the stitching and sutures to close that up to, a 2-inch slit in your thigh that, you have to keep it clean. You don't want it to get infected, but it's kind of night and day when it comes to true risk of that procedure.
Yeah, huge benefits. My dad had open heart surgery back when I was in high school, and I remember that being a brutal recovery for him. He was in the hospital for 5 or 6 days, and then, it was weeks at home just taking it really easily before he could really start moving around again. And I imagine it's much, much easier when it's a catheter-based procedure.
Yeah, depending, of course, on the procedure and also, honestly, the surgeon, time of day, things like that. But most catheter-based procedures, you're home either that evening or the next morning. Overnight versus a week in a hospital is a huge difference. Better, honestly, for recovery as well. And you're generally, up and moving and active pretty immediately as well. It really is a huge difference to the patient outcome.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so you worked for various companies doing catheter development, catheter manufacturing. What was it that you saw in the market that made you think, I think there's an opportunity to do this better, and I'm going to start my own company?
Yeah, I was watching lead times balloon, and then kind of what I felt was a lack of customer communication. Really just, I like working really closely with customers, and there's obviously a limit to how many customers you can work with at a time. But what I was seeing within the industry is the best contract manufacturers within the catheter space were too busy, had too much going on, weren't necessarily hiring appropriately for that increased workload. And as a result, lead times were going from, going 2x, 3x, 4x what they used to be. And then, customers weren't really getting told that their build was late until their build was already a week late. And I don't know, I think they already knew it was going to be late at that point.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And so BayCath was created to solve that problem, getting catheter development completed more quickly. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, exactly. We really are targeting faster iteration within the catheter development cycle, and then really trying to work closely with our customers, collaboratively with our customers, kind of going back to one of those earlier questions of, working together makes such a difference to long-term success of the project, in my opinion. I really like that collaboration. So really trying to work with our customers in person whenever possible. We have customers on site building with us all the time, which is very helpful as well.
That's cool. So they'll come to your facility and build there with you.
Yep, I had 2 customers on site from Texas all of last week.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome. In person, hands-on, together. Okay, so hopefully there's some people out there listening to this who think, oh, we design catheters. We should know Michael and his company. Maybe there's some opportunities to work together. That'd be great if that happens. I like connecting people, right? That's one of the purposes of this podcast, is connecting resources and those who need them. There might also be some people listening who develop catheters who think to themselves, we're not really ready to outsource any of this, but man, I sure would love to hear some of the best practices that Michael has developed or observed over the years. Are there a few best practices that you can share for those who just want to implement them into their own work developing catheters? What are some of the common problems you see that slow teams down?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Really early on, if you're building 1, 2, 3 parts, that often looks different than building 1,000 parts. I think from the very first part, you want to have a plan for how you're going to build 1,000. If it's a process that is unrealistic and unsolvable at that 1,000 scale, I think it's worth really reconsidering what you're doing at that early stage. Not necessarily, failing to build that first part, but starting to look at, how do I get to 1,000 immediately from that first point? And that's something I'll do a lot actually with customers when we have really, really complex projects is, we only have to make 1 or 2. But by the time that we've made that 1 or 2, I want to have a plan for 1,000. I want to know that we can get there. I want to know that we can get there at a cost that makes sense within the market. Because otherwise, the reality is that doesn't really work as a product. That's a process problem. But process problems are where a lot of good ideas go to fail.
What is catheter manufacturing like? Is it a highly automated process, or is a lot of this still done manually, even at larger medical device companies?
Yeah, it is surprisingly manual. I think even for engineers within the catheter space, within the medical device space, I often have people be very surprised by how manual building a catheter really is. And it comes down to it's a pretty hard process to give to a robot or give to an automated system, simply because there is a lot of variation from one part to another, especially when you're looking at different types of catheters. But even within one catheter line, within one part, there is just a lot of, touchy-feely type parameters that a seasoned operator or seasoned tech has spent 10 years learning and knows exactly how much force to put into that during that process, and then changes that according to different factors that they probably can't really speak to, but is absolutely a part of the process, which makes it really hard to automate. And there's really smart people working to automate catheter production. We've worked with a couple of those companies over the years, but it's not easy to do, and it takes a volume that not too many catheter projects really get to make financial sense.
Oh, interesting. Okay. What are typical volumes for complex catheters?
Yeah, it's a lot of our customers are earlier stage startups, often VC funded or something kind of in that realm.
Okay.
So a lot of our customers really are probably 3 to 5 years from true revenue or true sales. That's a combination of, FDA and other approval processes, and then also just market adoption. Big difference that we did a couple on-site visits actually with some of our local areas and did like a whole talk on just market adoption, how important that is in order to actually get physicians to buy into your product. But the key there being really, just because the FDA says you can legally sell it doesn't mean that people are going to come and buy it.
Sure. Yeah.
And it takes a long time, often longer than people realize, to go from, an idea to approval to really, hundreds a month is a decent volume for a lot of these products early on. Obviously, everyone wants to get to super high volume, thousands, tens of thousands a month, but that often takes an acquisition, that often takes someone like J&J, Boston Scientific, Medtronic, and their, hundreds of people on the sales team that support those products.
Yeah.
And a lot of our customers are looking for the acquisition and just looking for enough revenue to prove that they are acquirable and worthy of that.
Sure. Yeah. So BayCath Medical moves pretty quick, right? You can produce prototypes quicker than some of the other contract manufacturers out there. But catheters, medical devices are, of course, a regulated industry. How do you balance moving really quickly with the documentation that needs to go along with that?
Yeah, we put quite a strong line between R&D and production. There's of course a point where you hit production assembly where quality needs to be your number one focus, and those parts absolutely need to meet spec 100% of the time or get rejected out if they don't. But the reality is in R&D, we want to make high quality product, but our focus is going to be speed. Most of our customers are pretty happy with a little bit lower quality product at the expense of, or at the, in exchange for really fast product.
Yeah.
I'd venture to say we are probably the fastest catheter contract manufacturer in the world. No one's proven me wrong on that yet. Feel free to try. I'd like the challenge.
That's amazing. That's amazing. How do you think you got there? I mean, you're what, like a year old, something like that?
Yeah, we're only a year old, and really the key there is just we work with the same suppliers as everybody else. I have really good relationships with a lot of those suppliers, so if something goes a little bit wrong, we can tend to fix it faster than I think a lot of the bigger companies can. And then, if we get an order for 10 catheters, those materials are going to be ordered by the end of the day. Shipping speeds don't change. That vendor's time out the door doesn't really change. And then as soon as the parts arrive, we really are trying to schedule that build, as quickly as possible, off to within a couple of days. And then again, no one else can build those parts any faster than us. We just cut out the waiting, if you will.
Got it. Okay. So it's a logistics game, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. I really do look at contract manufacturing as supply chain management and, controlling the customer's BOM for them in a lot of ways, ensuring that their suppliers are providing high quality products, especially in production. But, managing a bunch of different people, bringing a bunch of different materials together, doing final assembly, final processing, and then getting out the door for our customers, preferably whenever possible, on time or early.
Yeah. So when a customer brings you a brand new catheter design, what are some of the early questions that you're asking before even getting into development, R&D?
Yeah, absolutely. I think how I would phrase this best is just how certain are you about this design? Really, that gives me a good feeling of, I've spent the last 6 weeks sitting at a whiteboard, drawing this out, and I'm very sure this theoretically works. Or, I don't really know. Like, it might work, it might not. Different approaches to both of those. I'm going to be honest, it's not always one better than the other. But it definitely changes our approach to it. If a customer is super certain that this is the design that's going to work, which I will say has never been the case, you have to be a little bit more careful about walking them through potential updates, if you will. If they're not too sure about it, it's usually pretty easy to be like, I'd suggest this. If you're open to it, I'd like to try, what you propose and maybe something else in parallel. Let's try both. And then between those two, it's probably one of those is a good option. We'll steer the next direction. And it tends to be pretty iterative, and it tends to take quite a few batches of parts to really get to that final perfect design. And I think that's a really good part of the process. And I think that's something, honestly, that most catheter CMs maybe hide behind a little bit. And we try to be pretty straightforward about it. Is you're going to need a couple test products, and we need some test data to really show which one works better, why, can you get to where you need to go in the body properly. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We try to do it faster and more efficiently cost-wise so that you can have multiple iterations instead of charging you hundreds of thousands of dollars for the first one. And then if it doesn't work out, that's a really bad spot to be.
Yeah. Is there like a very tactical skill that you can share? Something that you or your operators have used when they're building these complex catheters, that audience members who are also doing R&D work in the catheter space could try for themselves? Something that one of these like pro tips that you've just picked up over the years. Maybe it's you use this particular scalpel when you're manually skiving a catheter tube, or I don't know, something like that, right? But something really tactical and specific that an audience member could take away and say, oh, I'm going to try that tomorrow in the lab.
Yeah. There's some really, really easy like 3D printing options out there. So something like if you want to cut an extrusion straight, it's very easy as an engineer to print a quick little fixture with a razor blade hole in it, and then your extrusions are straight every time. That's going to save you some future issues. There's some other things in that realm that are pretty easy to get to as well. And we're working on some fixtures actually that we would give you the design for. We're just not quite there yet. But feel free to reach out. I can give them to you once we're ready. But there's just a lot of 3D printing has added a lot to the engineer's ability to make a really cheap fixture for something that doesn't necessarily justify $5,000 in stainless steel tooling.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. What are some decisions that get made early on in catheter design that end up having could have a pretty significant effect on the outcome long term?
Yeah, material selection tends to be huge. It's something that a lot of R&D engineers maybe overlook, if you will. But then once you get kind of more to that production side, it has a huge impact on biocompatibility. And changing those materials has often stops you from being able to make design changes. So be very careful with materials early on.
Yeah. What are a few of your favorite polymer materials for catheters?
Yeah, anything PBAX is really easy to work with. And I don't think most people realize this, but the reason you actually use PBAX in a catheter, it's not a great polymer for most of the reasons you look for a polymer. PBAX actually is not top level. The reason PBAX is so good is it bonds to different materials. So it can bond to softer and stiffer materials in a way that most polymers can't. We'll do nylons kind of more proximal end, and we'll go, I really like NewSoft up front, but there's a couple more options coming out as well.
It's almost like you know what you're talking about.
Almost like. I also have this great reference poster right next to me that we sell on Chamfer that makes it quite a bit easier.
That's helpful. Awesome. Let's see. How about design transfers? When engineering teams transfer designs to manufacturing, what are a couple of the things that you find often get lost in translation?
Yeah, tribal knowledge is probably the best word for it. It's that thing that the R&D tech knows that they have to do every time, but the engineer has never watched them do it. And therefore, that one weird specific thing has never made it into the MPI, the manufacturing process instructions. And therefore, it kind of just disappears in the transfer. Which, one, I think is a huge, I guess, opportunity for the engineer to go and make sure the process is right. Have your tech, have your operator review the MPI. And I like to have them sit down, build one catheter or two catheters with the MPI in front of them, go exactly step by step before it's released, and tell me where I'm wrong, because I guarantee you I'm wrong somewhere. I just want to know where.
We're all wrong on the first build, right? Like nothing ever works perfectly.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you have any stories you can share where, I mean, earlier you mentioned how customers will come to you with maybe completely unproven ideas, right? They just want to see if it's going to work. Any stories where you had to step in and kind of manage the tension between what a customer wants, what's technically feasible, and then what a customer can afford as well?
Yeah, we deal with that quite a bit. It's a reason to go to a company like BayCath. Is we're used to being on a little bit tighter budget. We're used to having a little bit tighter timelines. And we're pretty happy to play in that space. It's a hard balance. At the end of the day, I think it's really important to remember that everyone in that conversation is looking for the same end goal. We want to build long-term, a medical device that works for the application you're trying to build. Shorter term, we want to get you good workable parts at a price that you can afford. I'm not going to say, like, there are numbers that are unrealistic, but most people can get to numbers that are realistic. And often what that looks like is, an engineering team wants 100 parts. And we can absolutely build them 100 parts, but I can build them 10 parts for, 20% the cost of 100 parts. Let's really make sure the design is right before we build it. First of all, please don't DV test something first run. But let's make sure it's really right. And then if it's right, when it's right, then we go to 100 parts. But often if you do, overlap some testing, do your non-destructive testing before your destructive testing, you can get pretty far with 10 parts. Often about as far as you can with 100 parts on that original test plan. So let's be really efficient with how we're using the catheters. They can often be reused. Most people wouldn't tell you that, but as a single-use item in a medical, future surgery is single-use, you can probably use it 10 or 15 times if you had to, depending on what you're doing with it, depending on what you're testing. So just, again, collaboration, talk about the plan, try to save money where you can, but also, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of going super low quality on something like materials. We'll do it, but if you're sacrificing future quality of the device in exchange for cost, that tends to be where I try to draw the line.
Yeah, something I think is interesting is this cat and mouse game. It's not specific to catheters, but that's certainly one field. In medical devices, this cat and mouse game between the OEMs, right, the company that's originally manufacturing these devices, catheters, whatever it is, instruments, and then there are these companies that have sprung up over the past, 10, 20 years that reprocess these devices, right? And then sell them back to the hospital, in theory, for a lower price point. So you mentioned in an R&D area, you could reuse these catheters. But what have you seen in the industry or in the market now? This cat and mouse game between the OEMs and the reprocessors, is this becoming more and more prevalent? Are OEMs getting smarter about like anti-reprocessing, features that they put into these catheters, or is it not really that big of a deal? And I don't really know the space. I'm just tangentially aware of it.
Yeah, I'm only so familiar with that part of it, and I do think it's a very small percentage of devices being used. And where I've heard it more is a device that was originally for sale in the US was either used or wasn't used, and then gets re-sterilized, maybe repackaged, maybe reprocessed, and then gets shipped overseas, whether that's Africa, South America,
Yeah.
something lower cost. Especially in that scenario, in my opinion, I don't know, I really like that, just from a more people having access to healthcare they wouldn't
Sure.
necessarily have otherwise.
Yeah.
And then environmentally, if we can use the same part a second time, I really think we should. I know so companies like Intuitive actually reprocess internally and then send it back out to the physicians.
Okay.
So unique concept, but that's a company who's taken it upon themselves to reuse them because their catheters, I think, are a little bit pricier otherwise. But that's a way that they've been able to still be in the market with that pricier catheter.
That makes total sense. I'm surprised more, or maybe they do, more companies don't do that. If reprocessors are out there doing it anyway, why not just take that in-house and compete with yourself and the reprocessors to the benefit of your company?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that strategy as well. And then it's, certified by the original manufacturer that this is, in fact, good enough for the procedure, while also, ideally saving everyone a little bit of money as well.
Yeah, and you would think that the OEM could reprocess for much less than anyone else because they have the tribal knowledge of how it was developed, what kind of validation, verification it needs to pass, all that stuff. They already have those protocols in place.
Yep, and you're testing that part to the same protocols as the initial device being released, which makes me just feel a lot better.
Yeah, as a patient, definitely. Okay, you mentioned earlier that you were a lifeguard in a previous life. You also worked in emergency response and ski patrol, I think. And I'm curious, so those can be high pressure environments when something goes wrong anyway. Did you develop behavioral attributes that allow you to remain maybe a little calmer than the rest of us might under pressure? And has that translated into your work now? Because although you're not resuscitating someone on the factory floor, hopefully, engineering work, especially owning your own company and running it, can be very, very stressful. Have you found that any of the skills that you developed in the emergency response areas have translated into engineering or even just business ownership?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent 10 years as a certified EMT, have been working in some sort of emergency medicine closer to like 14 years, I believe, at this point. And honestly, I just really enjoy that kind of as a side hobby. Still work a lot of concerts and races and other venues that need volunteer emergency help. But I think the really important thing there to remember is, the most life-threatening emergency out there is probably not something you're ever going to see in an engineering manufacturing environment, which is a great thing. Most people don't want to deal with that in their daily lives. And I think that's important. I also think it's important to have that perspective when you go into, your build is 2 weeks late and you're, $10,000 behind on budget, and all of these things are real issues, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, it's not life-threatening. We can sit down, we can take an extra 5 minutes to think about it. There's no reason to lose sleep over a lot of the issues that we see in engineering and in manufacturing. And I also think it's really important to say, if you are an EMT or emergency medical worker, like working on an ambulance, working in an ER, those people are dealing with very time-sensitive, very important, very stressful scenarios. And then they take a break and move on, whether that's a new patient in the future or also just, 15 minutes gap between things. And it's really important, I think, from a manufacturing perspective, to take those breaks, to step aside for a minute, remove yourself from the stressful situation. Because again, it's not life-threatening. It doesn't need to be. We can take the extra 5 minutes, we can take the extra day, I'm a really big fan of customer communication, making sure the customer knows what's going on. But most of your customers you have a good relationship with, they're going to be okay with, hey, I'm so sorry. This happened, and this happened. We're doing these things to fix it. I always like coming with this happened and then we did this. Like, we are actively involved in this process. But really coming at it from I'm sorry it's going to be 5 days late. Most of my customers, when I tell them things like that, it's like, oh, okay. Like, we know you tried your best. We've worked with you long enough to know that there was nothing you could have done. You would have already done it.
Yeah, this is development, right? We're inventing things, and invention does not always go according to plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Earlier on in development, sometimes we'll have conversations with customers on, that, I don't know, like, why are we having to change this equipment for my device? Like, well, like, we're really pushing some limits here. Like, we are having to modify the equipment that makes 95% of catheters because yours is weird. And weird's good as long as weird works, but it does cost a little bit of time and money to make new equipment and, really modify a process to do, those edge cases.
I remember early on in pipeline, I had acquired a brand new medical device customer, and this is probably, I don't know, three or 4 years into pipeline. We're 17 years old now, so this was 13, 14 years ago. And it was probably maybe just me plus a couple of contractors. Maybe we had one full-time employee. I can't remember. Anyway, I was still building the business, right? There was working tons of hours, doing everything I could, being scrappy to find new customers. And we had what landed this, like, I won't say the name, but it is a global medical device customer. Anyone in the medical device space knows this company. And they sent me a project, and I was so excited about it. And it was just like a simple reverse engineering project. They had this blade. It's a long blade that goes into a surgical instrument. And they said, we only have one of these. Please be very careful with it. It's like $2,000 to get another one of these. So just, be careful, please. No problem. So I was super careful, taking all the measurements, right? And it came in this like hard plastic sleeve. And I put it carefully back into the sleeve. There's, those red rubber caps that go on these clear plastic tubes, right? I had the one rubber cap on one end, and I put the second rubber cap on the other end. And I thought, I don't know that second rubber cap went on all the way. I don't want this to come apart, in transit when it goes back to them. I better just push on that little rubber cap just a little bit harder, make sure it's all the way on. So I push on it, and the whole thing, the tube buckles with the blade inside. And I was just beside myself. I was mortified that I let this happen because it kinked the blade, right? Plastically deformed this blade. I took it out frantically. Oh, can I bend it back into shape? Can I remove this? No, there's just no way. So I was like, they're going to fire me. Like, my life is over. This is the worst thing that could ever happen. And I let them know about it. And they're like, oh, that's not great. Yeah, that's too bad that happened. And then we went on to work together for another 5 years after that and did tons and tons of business together. So like you said, right, these things can seem maybe not life-threatening, but like a significant source of stress in the moment. But most of the time, we make them out to be a bigger deal than they are in our own heads. And usually it all blows over and it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for the most part, people understand that your intentions were right and that just the fact that you brought it to their attention and understood that wasn't what was supposed to happen is way better than you shipping it back and pretending it happened in shipping or, whatever else slightly shady option you had. And you probably had plenty that I doubt you considered because there's a reason pipeline's still around today.
It's true. Had I tried to pull something shady and they found out, we probably would not have ever worked with them again. So, all right. Well, let's see, Michael. Let's do just one or two more questions, and we'll wrap things up here. What is one thing that you have done to accelerate the speed of engineering? something you've done yourself or seen others do?
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of planning ahead. It allows you to anticipate your future needs, plan for them, and then really, I mean, from my point of view, I make a lot of systems and future documentation around knowing that I'll need them in the future. And I think a lot of people, so I have a PMP certification, project management professional, and you can go really deep into the weeds into project management and spend 3 months planning how you're going to make this a month faster. And that's not helpful. Like, that just doesn't make sense. There's a point where you have a project manager in your project, and that's great, but they're doing it in parallel to the engineering. Like, you can't just stop engineering for 3 months.
Yeah.
I really like the concept of rolling wave development. So you plan out a very generic, high-level timeline for the full project, and then whether it's one stage or 1 month or one section of the project, you plan to a little bit more detail as it comes. And then when you end that section, you start to plan for the next one. So you have an idea of the total goals for the project, and then you really only focus plan on that next step of the project. Because inevitably, something's going to change in the next month or two. And if your plan 18 months from now changes because of that, you kind of wasted time planning for it.
Big time. That's great advice. What is something that you're trying to learn right now, or maybe a technology you're trying to discover, or a vendor you're trying to meet that potentially someone out in the audience right now could help you with? The goal is how can we connect Michael and something Michael needs with knowledge that someone out there in the audience already has?
Yeah, so we are currently working on a BayCath Innovation Week for this October. We have soft launched it, but still working out all of the details. We're having Damien Carr come into town from Ireland. He's going to do a 2-day workshop. We have Tommy Broke coming from Irvine. He's going to do a little bit of teaching in the catheter space as well. Really, really good lineup from more of my side of things. So, the engineering side of a catheter. What we're currently working through, and I'm really, really excited about, is we're going to do also 2 advanced clinical days for anyone that's interested. And what those are going to look like is surgeons teaching engineers what they want to see in devices, answering questions from engineers, giving that surgeon perspective. And then what we're ideally going to do is also some, live cases or recorded cases that those surgeons are going to walk us through. And the goal there really is, customer feedback in the way of the surgeon being the customer. That's the person using your device. That's the one who has to hold it in that weird handle you built 5 years ago and never fixed. That surgeon's the one that has to deal with that every day. So a unique feedback, really clinical focused. Again, that's October, I believe, the middle week of October. So really excited about that. But we're still working on a couple more physician-surgeon connections, preferably at Stanford and UCSF, likely in the neuro and EP spaces. So if you know anyone like that, if you are someone like that, would love to get in touch.
Perfect. That's a great request. Well, I hope someone out there listening can make an introduction or be that resource for you. That would be awesome. All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show today. How can, let's say someone out there in the audience does know such a physician that they want to introduce, or if they just have a question for you, want to get in touch, how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, my LinkedIn's really easy to get to, and I believe linked in the show notes. We also have the BayCath Medical website. We show up really high in results, so you should be able to find us. Bay as in Bay Area, Cath as in catheter. And then on our website, I have my email, my phone number, and you can actually book directly onto my calendar, which is only slightly terrifying. And then
no home address yet, though, huh? On the website?
No home address. That we did have the home address on a couple supplier documents for a little while, just because we were receiving materials there, and
Yep.
I think I finally fixed that.
Yeah, I remember that myself.
Yeah, I also have a networking group in the San Francisco Bay Area called MedTech Bay Area that I've been working with. Honestly, I'm just on a mission to meet every medical device engineer person out there. So if you're in the Bay Area, come on by. I'd love to buy you a beer. It's all sponsored by suppliers so that we can get, engineer to engineer conversations and really grow the industry as a whole.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right. Well, Michael, thank you again so much for being on the show. Congratulations on your success at BayCath Medical and best of luck moving forward.
Thank you, Aaron. Really, really enjoyed talking to you as always.
Likewise. I'm Aaron Montcur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services, visit us at teampipeline.us. To join a vibrant community of engineers online, visit thewave.engineer. Thank you for listening.